that helps to move people toward a direction of greater health in relationships and greater mutuality in relationships. That it's really important. And Nicola and I were just at a training through RevNet, looking at how to have conversations within organizations about healthy relationships, so that volunteers and building those relationships through children's organizations starts to follow in suit. And it was on the heels, actually, when I went to that the shelters and the Violence Against Women funded organizations had a manager, sort of consultant, come in and talk about building healthy organizations.
Certainly when you move from one organization to another, you have to think a little bit strategically about how you're going to start those relationships and you know, develop the trust, share the values, the philosophy, as Tammy has called it. It's not something that just happens once, and I think sometimes you do it on your knees because you've bumped against somebody in a way that was perhaps inadvertent, or that perhaps challenged something that was very basic to them. And so, you know, you have to get back and start again.
Maybe you were having a bad day.
Yes, and it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
Or you've just kind of brushed against something that maybe rubbed someone in the wrong way, or that resulted in a miscommunication. When you kind of think, oh my gosh, I wish I had sent an email. But I'm rambling a little bit, but I think it's a process of self-discovery as much as it is a process of other discovery. Because as you develop those relationships, you're also putting yourself out there. And it's through that exposure that people start to develop the trust and the partnerships. And it takes a certain level of confidence and risk to be able to do that.
And self-reflection.
Yes.
Which kind of brings us around to the concept of mentoring. Have some of you used mentors or gone through a mentoring process? Or really have anybody to go to?
No, well, however, I have contacts outside of that community. But to get back to the mentorship with volunteers, we have typically 8 to 10 volunteers in our office every week. I consider we're in a mentorship role with those volunteers, and they generally rotate because it's typically placements or short-term while someone's looking for work. And you have to engage them in a very short period of time, especially if they're only there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks. I think what's worked best for me is simply making them understand their role in the organization, how they're helping with the success, whether it's for stuffing envelopes or handwriting things for tax receipts. And so I think we do that in our organization ongoing.
Helping them understand the value of their contribution, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, what about for yourselves? Where do you go? Because we know in this business you don't go to the board, and we know in this business you don't go to your colleague necessarily, certainly not your boss. What do you do about when you need to talk with folks about, because this is a stressful kind of environment you live and work in. What do you do about that? Let me just bring you one quote that you've got in front of you. I think at the end of that little page right there, the quote page. Right at the bottom, when things go wrong in your command, start searching for the reason. Increasingly large circles around your own 2 feet.
Thinking of that Dilbert, the cartoon, I'm sure you've all seen it, you know, and Dilbert comes out and his boss is talking vision, and Dilbert comes out and says, all I want is a good job. You know, and
don't give me this vision.
But that's, you know, because the reality is that, you know, some people love that, but other people are looking for a good job. Mm-hmm. And what does a good job mean? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. But sometimes you can realize how ridiculous you are, You think about that, you know, if you were what is it called, the ugly boss, the mean boss, whatever it is. But he was just like tuned right out to all this vision, value stuff, it was like, yeah, blah, blah, blah.
I think it's also looking at, I think from my perspective, it's when you're talking vision, mission, and values, and it's sort of trying to look at, for some people, it's having those short-term goals and those win-win situations. It's that sort of low-hanging fruit phrase, and trying to be creative in terms of how you can link that to the vision, mission, values, to get that point through, to have that conversation, to have that success. And particularly, I think, we were talking about manuals. If you're provincially funded, you have all these directives and these things that you're supposed to be doing and timelines, etc. And sometimes I know myself, I get lost and caught up in that process, and then sort of needing to go back to that vision, and sort of saying to myself, it's those sort of short-term successes. It's that young person coming back through the door saying, this is what I'm doing now, and thank you. Or somebody coming back through the door and says, I received service from you, I now want to be a volunteer with you. And I think that's sort of important in connecting those sort of real-life situations that are happening as part of your work to staff, but then obviously links to the vision. Because I think that, to me, it drives me, and certainly when you're looking at sort of staff relationships, is bringing that type of information forward.
So you said you gotta live the vision in a practical way, in a real way that connects to the job that you're doing. And sometimes it's hard to see those connections.
It is, because as Pat said, it's sort of crunch time. It's sort of after April 1, you all have a sigh of relief, and it's kaboom, you're back into the swing of things of this, that, and the other, and you've got summer looming ahead. But it's those times when you need to have that opportunity of stepping back to reflect, because I think when you get really busy, that's when you sort of go a little bit off track, and then sort of making sure that you're still keeping on target in terms of keeping with that, and realising what that philosophy is what Tammy was saying, is always keeping that in the forefront. Even if, like, we were supported by McDonald's this past week for McHappy Day, so I generally dress up. So, even in terms I was green wig and big clown shoes and red blouse and big tie, and it was, for me, it's just in terms of, it's still our vision of our organisation, not that Edie dresses as a clown once a year, but it's, it's having that connection, and it's also sort of stepping forward and saying that, we need to drive this through in some way, and then I get back into my normal work gear. Shoes are really comfortable. If everyone wants a couple of couches, so then you're still connected to that vision, and whatever you're doing, you're still connected to that vision.
Long way from the lawyer.